everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the We Swap Manga Podcast. Very simple premise, the idea just being that myself and a rotating guest each are going to recommend each other prior to the podcast a volume of manga. We will each then in turn read that volume of manga, give each other our thoughts, and then we will both discuss a series that we have both either read or is completely new to us. For this first installment, I have with me the Hyoka master of AniTube himself, the host of Anime Twitch Jeopardy, Mr. Replay Value.
I hate that you introduced me that way, buddy. But it is true. Hello, everyone. I am Replay Value, and I'm excited to talk about manga with my good buddy, Logan, aka TazerLad, the host of this brand new podcast series. I'm so excited to be the first ever guest. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's going to be a good time, I think. So each manga, it's not going to be like randomly determined, basically. We could do that, but what we're going to do instead is have a central theme that we kind of orbit around. And because you and I are both into sports outside of anime YouTube, we decided we would go with sports manga, since we both have read a number, and at the same time there are still those kind of niche series that neither of us have really gotten the chance to read.
Yes, the most niche series on the planet, Haikyuu, of course.
Yeah.
No, I was excited when we decided we were going to do sports. For both Logan and I are in a fantasy football league together, American football. I know you Europeans love using that for soccer. But the United States tied with England in the World Cup, so it's soccer now. I hate to tell you.
Them's the rules.
Yeah, so I picked for Logan, since he has never read the Haikyuu manga, that he would read the first volume of Haikyuu. I, in turn, read Medalist, the figure skating manga, the first volume. Although I couldn't help myself, I also read the second one. Though I think for our conversation, we're just going to talk about the first. And then we decided to go with a sports manga that neither of us had read before, which was Climber, or Koko no Hito. I'd heard great things about it, and I figured that was better than us reading 9 Dragon Balls, a canceled Shonen Jump manga.
Or discussing Blue Box, a series predominantly known more for its romance themes, or actually its prioritizing of romance stuff over sports, often to the detriment of the sports stuff.
Oh, shit. I just want to tell the audience, when Logan proposed this, he was like, let's read Akane Banashi, because that's a sports manga. And I was like, absolutely not. No, it's not. Are you out of your mind?
Listen, I was going based off of like the high school definition of sport, which for my high school was like, if you need to take a concussion test for it, it qualifies as a sport. And in my high school specifically, if it was a one-act play you were doing, you technically had to take a concussion test.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine having to do a concussion test to perform Rakugo, but what do I know?
I don't know, maybe one of the spotlights falls and conks you on the head.
Oh, okay, wow, that's incredibly dark somehow.
I mean, it's literally the only thing I can think of happening, but anyway. Alright, so yeah, first we're going to talk about Medalist, which is a series that runs in monthly afternoon. I don't know how many chapters it currently has out, but it's written by Suru Maikata, and it basically features a young girl named Inori who is kind of chasing after this dream of becoming a figure skater. And figure skating is one of those sports where they really they want you to start super young. And so even though she's only, I think she's like 11, but even that, because she's only just starting, is considered super behind the curve. And so we're following kind of her journey, and also the journey of Tsukasa, who is her professional coach, and also kind of went through a very similar trajectory where he got into figure skating a bit late and then never really reached the heights he wanted to. And so I think it's kind of seeing Inori and encouraging Inori as a chance of, like, a second chance in the rink, if you will. So yeah, I guess, what were your initial impressions?
This is the best manga I've read in the last, year, I think.
Wow.
It's just so... hold on. I should actually check a list and see if that's true. I have all the media I consumed over the last 3 years, and I can just quickly scroll down. Oh, I guess Chihiro Furu finished. That was the best. Oh, I guess Kaguya finished too.
Yeah.
Those are both incredibly good. No, but I think Medalist was amazing. I love the art style. I love the writing. I'm not a big figure skating person, believe it or not. I realize that will be very shocking to anyone listening to this. But yeah, figure skating, not really something I'm interested in. And yet, Medalist seems to like capture it's just so good at explaining. Like I feel like one of my complaints with Yuri on Ice is that me, someone who doesn't give a crap about figure skating, it just drops a lot of terms on you, and it's like, hey, just figure it out. Like what a triple salchow is, I'm sure I pronounced that incorrectly. But like a triple Lutz, like, yeah, you'll just have to figure out like what the difference between those two is all by yourself. Meanwhile, Medalist is taking the time, since, I mean, obviously it's, a young girl who's learning how to ice skate. So it's actually taking the time to like, teach her as well as the audience. So I really appreciate that. I don't know. It's just, oh God, it's just so good, man. I don't know what to say.
No, I think it helps. There's a little bit of that, obviously. People tend to associate it with anime a lot, where it's like, okay, side character is narrating so that the audience isn't clueless, but it feels really natural. One, obviously in manga format more than anime, but it also just feels really natural because, as you said, Inori is this little girl who's learning this stuff for the first time. So it doesn't feel like it feels very natural.
Yeah. And the Inori and Tsukasa's relationship is very cute, but also, very focused. I think everyone likes underdog stories a little bit, and Inori is totally an underdog because she's coming into figure skating so late, and then we meet all of these prodigy characters. I don't actually know if we meet the prodigy characters before in volume 1 or 2. Again,
we do. We meet.
Do we meet Hikaru?
Yeah, we meet Hikaru. We get kind of that moment of her jumping, and Inori's like, "You're so cool. I want to know how to jump. I can't do that yet."
Yeah. I feel like Hikaru's a really cool character that I'm excited to get to know as I continue to read the series. She's obviously, the genius, the prodigy. And meanwhile, Inori's her little bench player. I can't help myself. Gotta throw in the Hyoko references. Inori, is just battling to do, the basics, but she's got determination, and I feel like that is the quintessential protagonist for any sports story. Is you want someone who's very determined to make their dreams come true.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Tsukasa just pairs super well with her because he's so enthusiastic. Like I'm looking at a page off to my right now and just seeing how he's drawn with kind of the same fervor, if not more so than Inori often, where it's just like, I see something special in her. I want to be her coach. Let me do this. She has potential. And I think, like, especially when you're younger, that's really all you want, is someone who believes in you to that extent and is willing to stick their neck out for you. And just seeing that relationship from that angle of kind of like, it's not necessarily like coddling her or anything, but it's very much like, I will be in your corner. We will do this. And, I don't care what it takes.
Yeah, and she needs a little bit of coddling because her mom is so not supportive at the start.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I do appreciate, is that, the mom is just trying to be realistic, right? Like, but it's hurting, Inori in her soul, and Tsukasa is able to be like, yo, we're going to make this happen. The dream doesn't die today. And I think that I really appreciate his role, and also that, his original dream didn't really work out. Here is a way to stay involved in the sport that he loves and like kind of modulate to a new dream. And I think, I love their interactions, and I love the other coach and her interactions with him. And yeah, it's all, oh God, the character writing is so solid. Yeah, it's just incredibly solid. I've got nothing but high praise for Medalist. This is, you've been talking this up for so long. I'm glad that this podcast exists, so you were able to force me to actually get her done.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you bring up something that's interesting that I can't really think of a ton of sports manga that do it off the top of my head that I've seen, is kind of focusing on that a little bit of, push and pull between a parent and their child, because most of the time a parent is either just absent or they're not really a factor, right? I think because in a lot of cases, right, it centers around a high school sport, like we'll talk about with Haikyuu. So there's never really, I think, a discussion as much of professional aspirations as much. If it is, it's kind of secondary to just like I just want to play. And because it's a club activity, it's like, okay. Like, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Or at least that's like the assumed, demeanor. I don't think Kageyama is sneaking out of the house to go play volleyball.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that, taking it out of the club setting definitely makes it a little bit weightier. This is something that, the parents have to pay money for. Tsukasa is getting paid to be a coach, right? Like, yeah, I totally agree that there's a little bit more weight and I guess, yeah, professional focus is really the best way to put it. And it really structures the first volume because so much of their time is after, getting permission to do it is now, okay, now what do we have to do to prove that this is a good use of time? Mm-hmm. And that's where the whole badge test system comes in. And, let's gain approval with results. And that's why there's so much focus on, okay, what are we going to do at this first examination?
Yeah, exactly. It's really, like, it's just, I would say very well paced because it gets into that. Again, we won't go further than volume 1, but like, by the end of volume 1, we are kind of just slinging full throttle into the first competition and with like really no wasted momentum. I also just like how Medalist kind of portrays kid friendships in a way, it feels like. I think it just captures like innocence around like childhood friendship because you have, Inori just randomly meets Hikaru and it's just like, we're friends now. This is fun. And kind of same thing with Mittens. But at the same time, you also have the one like kind of bratty kid, the Rio, who is just like, don't talk to me. Don't talk to me unless you can skate. Can you skate? Oh, I didn't ask your name. Shut up. We're leaving. Bye. I don't know. I just think that's very indicative of a good understanding of, I think, how simplistic kids can be. And it kind of like helps reinforce that, like, okay, yeah, these kids are like, there is this heavy level of competition, but they are still just kids.
Yeah, the scene where Inori and Mittens is just like, you and I, we're friends now, and I'm gonna drag you wherever the hell I want to until Inori is like, hey, I actually got to focus on becoming a figure skater, and then that becomes a whole issue of, oh, we're no longer friends. Like you like adults, which is such a ridiculous conflict for children to have. But hey, I'm here for it, and I will say, just like, yeah, and speaking of the whole dragging around thing, I love the way that characters are drawn in this, like whether it's the normal quote unquote realistic style or the stylized, well, I'll just use Mittens as the example, like when she becomes a cat, like a shadow cat in the images, or like screaming angrily, or it's just all of the art is amazing. Every single panel is a treat to look at. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm looking at one panel right now of Inori basically prepping for like one of her like jump spins, and just like the way like the momentum and action is conveyed is just, it's so well done. Totally. And it only, gets better. And one thing that I really notice about this first volume that like honestly it decreases in later volumes, but I wouldn't say necessarily to like a detriment, is just the more simplistic art style gets focused a bit more. Because that's one thing I noticed when I was like going back through volume 1 for this, is that when the character designs get simple, it kind of feels like the mangaka is just doing whatever like feels best in the moment, which is cool. Right. But I think at the same time that can lead to feeling a little bit, I guess, disjointed.
Yes, I will say it is weird to go from Tsukasa, showing the dance program in this like elegant, beautifully flowing panel selection, and then like not even 2 pages later we have frigging stick figure designs as new characters appear on the scene. Like it is very that kind of consistency matters. But I personally like both formats. I just I just think and the paneling is just so sick. Like anytime they're on the ice and doing something, the paneling, the way it conveys speed and motion, God, it's so sick.
I just think it like opens up to in general, which is I think a subtle way of really showing like the freedom that the ice is providing.
Totally.
That sounds very pretentious, but I'm just like
no, that isn't pretentious at all. It's totally correct.
Yeah, I'm like looking at like when Tsukasa is like doing his ice dancing thing and it's like a spread and it's just it's
or like think about the first chapter when, you know, Inori is getting bullied at school, isn't getting to ice skate. All the panels are really like very boxed off, small, and then the second she gets on the ice, the paneling opens up. It's incredible. God, it's just I mean, it's so sick. The first time when the zoom panel, as I'll call it, when she gets out on the ice after Tsukasa's like, I believe in you, and her mom is like, she shouldn't be doing this. God, just the way it opens up is so frigging slick. This is such a bad thing to talk about in a podcast because no one can see what I'm looking at, as I'm realizing. Hopefully, listener, you have your volume 1 of Medalist in front of you as we talk about this.
Yeah, I think like kind of going to that, especially in like the intense panels, like I think often what a mangaka will think is like, I want this to be like super sharp and super focused when things get serious like that, because they want to obviously like reinforce posture, facial features and stuff to really get across the emotion. And I think Medalist obviously does that, but I think at the same time, it still retains that messy enough art style that it kind of has.
Yes.
And I wouldn't even say like messy, but just like, you know, like the line art's like a little, I guess like scrappy would be kind of like the way I love
that you said scrappy. It totally is.
And it's just, I don't know, it just works. Like I love scenes in manga in general when like you'd have most of the page being taken up by the character and it's just like either they're not saying anything or it's very simple and it's just like, you know, the primary objective of it is to convey just like chills, and Medalist just has a shit ton of that.
It's God, and the inking, the coloring is so good. The way that like the manga uses shadows. I mean, it's black and white, but it feels like it's in color, which is such an insane thing to say. And also insanely pretentious, speaking of pretentious things. No. But I really do feel like when Inori is on the ice, that I'm seeing it in color, which is unbelievable.
Yeah. I'm also just looking at like where we get the introduction to that one guy who's smoking and Inori's just like, I don't want to be here. And just like the way the fucking smoke is drawn is insane. Like it feels like a completely different manga. Like you could be seeing this in like any kind of like action series or fucking detective story.
Oh yeah, the first shot with the cigarette. Yeah, that one is sick, dude. God, it looks so cool. Oh, I really could just gush about Medalist's art for a full hour.
Yeah, I'm glad that I'm not the only one, and that it's just like the energy that I got when I was reading this has been reciprocated.
Hell yeah, brother. So Medalist from replay value, 10 out of 10, would read again, and will be reading in the future as new volumes come out. Should we jump over to my recommendation and see how you liked the first manga chapter or the first manga volume of Haikyuu?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and give that introduction.
Cool. So for those of you who don't know what Haikyuu is, I'm sorry that you're from Mars. Haikyuu is a volleyball manga and a very famous and well-loved anime following Hinata, who one day while biking to a athletic event of some kind, stumbles upon a television screen that has the Little Giant, a young volleyball player from Karasuno High School, playing at nationals. And from that moment on, Hinata, who is very short, finds this vision of a other short person jumping up against a net and spiking against much taller opponents, so enthralling that he devotes his life to volleyball. And while the first chapter is mostly setup, introducing us to Kageyama, his rival / friend, who plays on another team in middle school. But really, the story starts when Hinata goes to high school, which Kageyama is also a student at, and they are forced to become partners in crime to hopefully make Karasuno a former titan of high school volleyball in Japan that is no longer good. Once again, one of the best teams in the country. And hopefully Hinata will learn how to actually be good at volleyball, because he starts off being terrible. how'd I do on my introduction to Haikyuu there?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty spot on. Hinata is basically an athletic, speedy boy, and that's about it. Which, I mean, to be fair, he only started playing volleyball, like, relatively recently, didn't have a club, so was kind of just doing what he could to learn the game.
Yeah. He couldn't compete in a match in middle school until his final year in the final possible tournament. It's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Also, like, reading the first chapter, and you're gonna hate me, it feels similar to Blue Box.
Oh boy, I was wondering how long it would take for Blue Box to get referenced in this.
I had the thought once in my head while I was reading the first chapter, and I was like, I gotta bring this up.
Wait, I don't even. Please explain. I really don't see it.
It's mostly just how the first chapter is kind of just gets you into this sense of, like, something's going to happen, right? Setting up both of the principal characters, and then there's a last-second twist that involves them actually being on the same team, whereas in Blue Box it involves them living together.
Oh, okay. I guess.
It's a loose idea.
Bro. Because literally I'm thinking, Blue Box, aren't they just setting up, like, Taiki's romantic interest for most of this? Meanwhile, I mean, I guess hey man, if you want to ship Haikyuu characters, that's your prerogative. I'm not
shipping them.
You're in good company on Twitter as far as things I see in my feed sometimes.
No, it was mostly just thinking about, like, literally just based on that sole idea of, like, now they have to work together, or now they're together instead of, enemies sort of thing.
For sure.
Obviously, from there, it's completely different. And, like, yeah, I think the first chapter of Haikyuu does a very good job compared to Blue Box, but I'll stay away from the Blue Box comparisons.
Oh, thank God.
But, like, Haikyuu's first chapter does a very good job of kind of setting up still, even though it is set up. I think it does an amazing job of still telling you what this manga is going to be about, which is obviously volleyball, but, like, even the fact that, again, we only get a very little amount of it, technically. Like, we only get part of one match played in this first volume. Well, I guess technically two parts of two different matches, but no full match, really.
Yeah.
Like, despite that, it is filled with volleyball still. And I think that's honestly sometimes what, like, the biggest sin of a sports manga can be is when it like drags its feet and it doesn't really get an opportunity to show you the sport that it's trying to hype up. But Haikyuu just, like, right out of the gate, it's very efficient in terms of, like, how, you can very clearly feel Hinata's enthusiasm. Like, Hinata is just a fantastic main character because he just has that good boy energy that's just like, I'm gonna give it my all. I don't care. And it's like, I just want to play volleyball. And I don't know, when you have such a simple and pure motivation like that, it just really works.
Yes.
And, like, full disclosure, for the audiences, I have watched the Haikyuu anime. So, like, none of this was necessarily, like, new to me, but it was still cool to revisit a story that I'm very fond of in its manga format and kind of see, the different choices that were made. Because I think one thing you mentioned about Medalist was, like, how they convey speed. Mm-hmm. And, like, very much here because, as we said, like, Hinata's defining characteristic is his ability to jump and his fast as hell speed. And so Furudate has to convey that. And I think they do a very good job of selling you on, like, blink and you miss it and Hinata's just gone.
Yeah, what you're saying about the speed is so right. It just feels so natural to convert this into an anime. The way that motion is conveyed on the page, it feels like when you watch it as an anime, the production IG team must have just had the easiest time adapting it because they basically copy the panels one for one. And they convey the motion on the paneling without doing the, like, frame by frame style that a lot of other sports anime will do. Like, when you're thinking about hitting a pitch, they'll do the load up, the contact, the follow through. This just shows, like, the key moment or, Hinata about to jump, loading up, and then he's already in the air. They're not doing the whole springing motion. I just think the transition must have been so easy on a pure paneling level because Furudate's skill at conveying motion in the panels. Haikyuu is really second to none when it comes to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like, honestly, because I've watched the first episode of Haikyuu like a number of times on its own, and I was thinking about like several key moments where it felt like, yeah, they just took what Furudate had laid out, but they just expanded on it and made it like just as impactful that you would need to do in anime. Like when Hinata runs past Kageyama, like that's a single small panel in the manga, but in the anime, if I'm remembering correctly, he passes in front, and because Kageyama's looking over to like his right, and then you just see a blur go past him, and the background is white, and so it's like that kind of stuff is like the bones were there with the manga in terms of that conveying of speed, and the anime staff at Production IG were just like, yeah, we can work with this.
Right.
Even just like also on like the smaller flourishes too, like the first time Kageyama sets foot on the court and you see kind of that king aura thing, which I thought that was going to be in the manga, and I was surprised that it wasn't. I know it's a cover page like later on.
Right.
But that was obviously clearly an idea that Furudate had that they didn't put in the first chapter, but the anime staff went back and said, like, this is really dope. We can use this imagery.
Yeah, the anime just does a great job of connecting the panels. It's very clearly Furudate's brilliancy at play in terms of the way that the characters are blocking. Like even in like the smaller panels, like the one that you just mentioned where Hinata's a blur going by Kageyama. That panel is so minimalist in the manga because it's building up to, him streaking across the frame about to hit this ball for what should be the sickest point in volleyball history. And just the way that they were able to connect that image and make it, a little bit more impactful was so clever because it works that way for the anime. Meanwhile, in the manga, it's perfect to set up the big next page. God, it's just so brilliant.
It really is just knowing like the strengths of both mediums. And I think honestly, to an extent, like seeing how skilled Furudate is like that early on in Haikyuu, game recognized game. I'm sure the people on the staff were like, okay, yeah, we got to do this justice because it's so good and it's so clear what we need to do to make this awesome in anime form.
Absolutely. Yeah, so how do you think Haikyuu serves as like a character introduction though? I feel like we have sang the praises of the art and the style and, given credit to Production IG for a great anime adaptation. How do you feel the anime does or the manga does at introducing the characters in this first volume? And I'm not just talking about Hinata Kageyama, I'm also talking about our larger secondary cast.
I think it does an especially good job setting up Hinata and Kageyama as kind of, two halves of a very similar whole in the sense that they both like love volleyball, like that they eat, sleep, breathe volleyball, but at the same time they have, very different approaches. But I think honestly the rest of the volume does a really good job of bringing in their senpais, everybody else on the team, Daichi, Sugawara, and Tanaka. Mm-hmm. And making them each feel distinct and also kind of in a way that you want to learn like more about them too. It's like, it's very subtle, but like the whole idea obviously that is spelled out in Haikyuu is that it's a sport that you can't do alone. It's something that, it's like you can't touch the ball twice in a row, so you literally cannot do everything. And I think the way that Haikyuu sort of starts to build up the personality of everyone else, whether it be Sugawara offering to set for Hinata, just in kind of out of that sense of empathy of like being like, well, Kageyama's kind of being a little standoffish and I want to help out, my kohai. Whereas, Daichi, he's very like stoic in a way, but also just very like, he's very no nonsense.
Right. Daichi's like, the fucking best, bro.
I love him. He's like, obviously knowing like where he goes in anime from what I've watched, but even just to start off, just, seeing how everyone's just like, he gets really scary when he's angry. You're like, yeah. And even just, again, his form of discipline feels very measured, because obviously it's like, for a lot of sports series, the ultimatum that Daichi would give them would be, beat us or you're not on the team, or like do this or you're not on the team.
Right.
And that's obviously not the case. He's like, no, you guys can be on the team, I'm not kicking you out, but if you don't beat us, then Kageyama can't play setter. And obviously Kageyama like takes that like it's a goddamn et tu brute moment of just like you're gonna take away everything that I am just
Right.
like that.
Yeah, I think it does a good job of highlighting, though, that Kageyama, like, for him being setter is, like, breathing air. Like, it's really the only thing he wants and is meant to do. I also think that it also shows perfectly well that, like, Hinata is kind of just a secondary concern. Like, he's got rough skill, but he probably isn't adding much to a team in terms of just, like, his raw ability is just too raw right now. Like, it's going to take a little bit of time for him to actually matter, which I think is very well done. The one character I wanted to highlight is Suki, because holy shit, you are not supposed to like this kid in the first volume.
Suki just comes in and is just like, if Kageyama is just like a control panel, he's just like, how many buttons can I press at the same time?
I love him.
I'm gonna yeah, I mean, obviously, again, we both
grow to
know,
love him so much over the run, but
I do have a soft spot for characters like that like start off with just like obviously they're meant to give you a certain opinion and then they grow beyond that. Like it's character writing 101 in a lot of ways, but like I think with Suki, it's very it's fun because he is also a newbie, right? He's also a first year on the team. So it's like, where do you get off? Like being, it's like you don't have like this typical, you would think like position of authority, right?
Right.
You just, you're also in the same bucket as us, but here you come in being like, oh, Mr. King of the Court over here. Did I mention that he's royalty? Yeah, he's King of the Court, Kageyama.
That's so funny. Tanaka hates him so much in this first volume. It's so funny.
Which again, like I think that's like we were saying in terms of character work, like gives everybody like a slightly different role. Whereas Tanaka, you can kind of sense it. It's coming from a position where he hasn't had to deal with a lot of responsibility to kind of like not necessarily accepting it with open arms, but definitely relishing in this idea that he has some inherent respect just by being a senpai.
Yes.
And like I loved that moment when I was reading it. I remember it from the anime when he's just like he wakes up super early. Yeah, he's like, call me senpai. I got the keys. Like it's like senpai again. All right, let's go.
Tanaka's such a lovable goofball. I love him so much.
I was gonna mention though about like Tsukishima. I think that isn't like we're not gonna like necessarily delve too deep into it because I don't remember much of it, but I do remember from the Haikyuu one shot, which is very similar to like chapter 1. Mm-hmm. But I believe Suki and Yamaguchi are second years.
That would track. I've never read the one shot, I don't believe.
I think I noted that as being like one of the very few changes that I found interesting. But I wonder if like maybe that potential air of superiority for Udate was like, no, I want to keep that. I don't care if they're both first years. He's tall as fuck and he just wants to push buttons.
I mean, he's just the cool, calculated, I'm gonna win by annoying the shit out of my opponent character, and I think we all love to hate that character. And then he becomes our guy. Like I also really appreciate that, Haikyuu is not so focused on making it like we're all on the same team right now. Like in those first few chapters, Daichi is awesome and we respect him because he's scary in a different way than Kageyama. Kageyama is scary in a I'm gonna kill you way. Daichi's scary in a I am the sole authority. I'm God, basically. Which I think is awesome. And then he's on the opposing side, and we're like, well, he's not on, Hinata's team per se. So there's a little bit of animosity. And then Suki and Yamaguchi are definitely on the opposing team because it's the only context in which we know them. So it's nice to have, a clear antagonist now that Kageyama and Hinata are on the same side. I just think it's a clever bit of writing.
Oh, definitely. Especially because, again, there's that whole idea of I'm putting you two on the same team so you have to learn to work together or there will be consequences. Anyway, here's the other two that are joining that are also new. They're going to be your opponents.
Right.
But putting them obviously in stark contrast to what he's doing with Hinata and Kageyama.
Totally.
And also, like, again, with Suki, he very much emphasizes that idea of just like, it's just a game, which I think is very central to his character early on.
Yes.
And But I also think, obviously that's another aspect of volleyball that the main cast is kind of putting out there, because there are obviously people that are just like, yeah, I mean, it is just a game at the end of the day. Why let it get to you, sort of thing, which again, I think that very much comes from a outsider perspective, which would make sense as to why, Tsukishima, as it goes on, that mentality breaks down a little bit.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments in Haikyuu anime is Tsuki getting over that,
Yeah, but even early on, it's obviously setting up that okay, this is what going on a macro sense, this is what this character is quote unquote meant to represent in the story.
Yeah.
From a theming perspective.
Yes. Yeah, I really appreciate that there are so many strong foils within the Karasuno team, even early on. And as more characters get introduced, though, obviously that all takes place after Volume 1.
I also thought the comedy was just as strong in Volume 1 as it is in the anime, if not more so.
Hell yeah.
Because I couldn't remember how this happened. I didn't remember this moment as much in the anime, but in the manga it had me fucking laughing, was when Hinata and Kageyama are rehearsing what they're gonna say, and they're just to themselves 1, 2, and yeah, and they say it at the same time.
We challenge you to a match.
Yeah. It's they actually said it.
So funny.
That's also, I think, just something that, in the anime inherently, it doesn't get as much of a focus because it's just them saying it. But when it's given its own panel of just 1, 2, I don't know, it just works.
Yeah, I think the anime does most of its comedy through the shock reaction images, where the background becomes bright multicolor. You know what I'm talking about?
I was thinking of when Suki is insulting Kageyama and Tanaka's fist just he's like
yes, that's a good moment too. But I do feel those are more underplayed in the anime just by the nature of the medium.
Right.
Yeah, I feel in the anime the comedy is very much the shock reaction. We've been thrown out of the gym because we don't recognize each other as teammates yet. That feels more the comedy in the anime.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, honestly, to kind of to cap off Haikyuu, it's a great sports story to start. I think I would definitely be picking up more volumes or just reading more for the sake of being able to experience this story in both mediums, because I think Volume 1 has definitely been strong enough to convince me that the anime isn't the only way to experience it. Totally. Which I never assumed, but it's nice to have that confirmation.
Yeah, you shouldn't assume. It makes an ass out of you and me. Sorry, that was a bad joke.
Well, you know what they say about assumptions. Makes an ass out of you and umption. There,
and on that note,
joke.
Let's talk about Koko no Hito, a.k.a. the Climber.
Yeah, so neither of us had read this. You had heard of it. I had honestly never heard of it. I didn't even know its English name was The Climber until, yesterday.
It's crazy how that happens.
Yeah. What were your initial impressions of it then?
Dude, this manga's so effing good. It's so obviously a 2000s manga in terms of its style and the kind of characters it's focusing on. I mean, we can get into, giving a brief summary for people who aren't aware. I don't know. It just felt like this was slam dunk characters if they were dropped into the Sports Climbing Girls anime from a few seasons ago. You know what I'm saying?
There was one panel specifically that I was just because you had brought that up beforehand talking about Sports Climbing Girls, and I was like, what is he smoking? And then I saw the fucking panel where
you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, he ping pongs up the wall with a little sight path of that's what I'm gonna do. That was I've only seen 2 episodes of Sports Climbing Girls, but I remember that shit.
Dude, I was laughing so hard when that showed up for the first time. I was like, did Sports Climbing Girls copy this from this? It just seemed so unbelievable. But it probably did, in all honesty. I don't see how you could make a climbing series without reading this. It's amazing.
Yeah, so I guess to give a little bit background, the series is focused obviously on climbing, following the protagonist Mori, who is, a lot of kids fresh to his new school and very much a loner type. I don't think he says that much in the first chapter.
No.
But gradually over the course of the first chapter and then throughout the first couple volumes, he just gets absolutely addicted to climbing. because I don't know if we've really, I could be wrong, but I don't know if we've necessarily dissected totally what has enthralled him with climbing so much.
I really just get from the first 3 volumes, the only thing we really have to go off of is like, it just gets his heart pumping, and Mori seems like he's more or less willing to die because of stuff that happened previously that is alluded to and I think made kind of obvious by the end of, I think, volume 2. It's even made pretty obvious.
They outright like say it in volume 2, and then
That's
like, yeah,
true.
and, like in volume 3 we get like a flashback from Mori's perspective of more or less what happened.
Yeah. So, and because of that, and I'm sure a bunch of other trauma in his past, like this man just does not want to be alive. But climbing, electrifies his body in that really iconic, I mean, it's not, I don't know how iconic it is, but that great panel, and it seems like, he's been called, I guess, and then he keeps trying to climb that mountain, Takatori. Yeah, I mean, God, it's just, it feels like the manga starts on a pretty high note, like pretty high adrenaline, and just never lets go. The tension
makes
is
sense.
Constantly ramping. It's sick.
Well, tension is important in climbing.
Well,
that was episode 1.
That was... Wow, that was a lot.
It's good though. I sent this to you, but like there's obviously some very gratuitous shots of climbing muscles in general.
It's great.
Like with Miyamoto like fucking hanging off the basketball hoop, but just like
yes,
back muscle. I was like, oh shit, we grappler Baki now.
I wouldn't go that far. It's not that ridiculous.
It's not that ridiculous, but like in terms of like, I mean, he was looking like the Armored Titan in terms of like how defined his back muscles
that's pretty fair. That is very, very fair. God, it is kind of sick.
And the mangaka also really likes drawing lips at a very detailed. It's like it's fun. Like I've definitely grown to. It is distracting, especially the first couple times. Like, there's a scene where Mori, like, touches Takatori for, like, the first time, and it just looks like he has not had a sip of water in 2 weeks.
The man was desperate.
Yeah.
He was thirsty to climb. There is something to this, like, I don't even know what art style you would call it. It just feels 2000s-y to me in terms of, like, the character designs, but just, like, very sharp color gradients. Like, the faces are all white and the hair is all black, and they all have ridiculous hairstyles that would be perfectly fine on an NSYNC poster. It's just very funny to me that this is the climbing manga art style, but I think it works really well. It's rough, it feels like, and climbing is not the easiest sport in the world on the body.
To be honest, that was my biggest suspension of disbelief, was when in volume 3, I won't like spoil necessarily what's happening, when the teacher is being pulled up by somebody else.
Yes.
And he says, like, with all that gear on, you're at like 100 kilos or something like that. And it's like, translators are like 220 pounds. I was like, you're telling me this guy weighs 220 pounds when he's fucking shredded with all of the gear on?
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about the guy who, quote unquote, hasn't been in the mountains for a while. So
no, they were talking about Sensei, I thought. They were talking
is
about
Sensei pulling him up, or
no, he's pulling Sensei up.
Oh,
and
I see. Yes.
How,
there's no shot. There's no shot. I mean, I guess he could be short. He is a kind of, I mean, he could be shorter. That would be accurate. Yeah, I mean, God, that I feel like everything in volume 3 on the snowy mountain is just gorgeous.
It really is. And also in terms of like characters that, like, we were talking with Suki, that like you're kind of made to hate, like, is it Takeda?
Yeah.
One of his names is Mutsumi.
Yes.
Which was distracting.
Yes.
Because it happens on a panel, like he gets called Mutsumi on a panel with a girl character, and I'm so used to associating Mutsumi with like a female character that I was like, wait, who's talking here?
Right. Yeah.
But anyway,
I don't remember the writer's name.
Yeah, like the journalist. But
yes.
If you've read the series, you know who we're talking about. Like, I did fucking flips, like, I probably at least 5 times between, like, understanding where the guy was coming from and, like, hating him. And, like, he does it, too. Like, he very much is like, I'm gonna be, like, this unlikable piece of shit. But, what about this? Actually, though, yeah, I did that fucked up thing, but I did it for a reason. But I didn't do it. But I did.
It's really funny on it. When you put it like that, it's so funny. And yet every single reveal as it's happening chapter and page by page, it's like, oh shit. Oh
no, it works
shit.
really well.
It's insane how well it works.
It's just in terms of like that character that you're supposed to hate and like the amount of whiplash that goes back between, which I mean, is apparently what he was going for. Like he wanted to be hated.
Right.
And so it works on that sense.
I feel like we are unfortunately kind of spoiling, but I feel like, I mean, both of us stopped at volume 3. So we're just both so... I don't know about you.
Maybe
the second we're done with this, I'm reading volume 4. I've been waiting a week and a half to continue reading. This shit has been on my mind. It's consuming me the same way that the mountain is consuming Mori. Okay, we're currently sitting in the year 2023. This manga was publishing in the late 2000s, early 2010s. I feel like we've moved past this kind of depressed, partially suicidal main character who finds X and it solves all of his problems. And I feel like through 3 volumes of The Climber, that is more or less exactly this is exactly that story. Do you think
it really does feel like that?
Did stories like The Climber kill that kind of narrative? Like, or is it just like not as deep, I guess, is the question in your opinion?
I mean, honestly, I don't know if it necessarily killed, like maybe it killed how this type of story is told, like with this specific protagonist, but like I think when you boil it down a little bit, it can be considered, I think, similar to Haikyuu in the sense that what they've been preaching, what all the supporting cast have been preaching so far in Koko no Hito is that, like, you can't go climbing alone. You can't go climbing alone. You're gonna die. Stop it. And, Haikyuu is obviously very much also about that sense of connection that, like, you can't do it on your own. Mm-hmm. And so I think they're both going to be, like, approaching somewhat, like, a similar, like, thematic endpoint, but just taking very different paths to get there. Even as Mori gets better, quote unquote, I guess you could say, or like, becomes a bit more open, it still is very much highlighting his tendency to do at best reckless shit and at worst, like, basically stuff that will get him killed.
I feel like the entirety of the volume 3 storyline is just like he should have died multiple times. And the fact that he didn't just seems unrealistic. I mean, obviously the manga ends if he dies, but it's going so out of its way to portray this as like dangerous, and yet him succeeding anyway, that I feel like it's almost undercutting its points. Although, I mean, in chapter 31, the final chapter of volume 3, there is a suggestion that, wait, maybe actually climbing alone is the way to do it. So I'll be really interested to see where the story goes from here.
And that could completely undermine exactly what I was just talking about, which is, possible. But there is, something to be said for, Mori just taking up every challenge and much like an anime protagonist, just not dying when he probably should have, like, several times now.
Right.
Yeah, because again, with the competition, he kind of screws himself by going alone a little bit. And in the early chapters, literally knocks himself out trying to... See, that's the thing. It's not even necessarily that he's, like, climbing by himself, because I think there are people that do climb by themselves, but it's also just the fact that he's free soloing
as a total rookie.
As a total rookie, as just like, I'm just gonna, which for anybody that doesn't know, free soloing just means no equipment whatsoever, really, beyond just like probably like hand chalk or whatever to get your grip. It's just climbing in its rawest form.
It's also a very fun documentary.
Yes, it's very good. Gave me vertigo.
Really?
No, not quite that bad, but as someone who has a fear of falling, it was a hell of a trip to watch in a theater.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh, I can't. I watched it on just, my TV, and God, I mean, it's just so beautifully shot. Yeah, Free Solo is great. I was going to make a whole video about climbing stories, and then I didn't, and I feel like I should do that now. Maybe after I finish The Climber, I'll have incentive to make it, because holy shit.
The Climber versus that one really cute moe show that's about hiking.
Yuru Camp?
No, it's like Yama no Susume or something like that.
I haven't seen it.
Encouragement of the Climb. That's what it's called. It's like one of those really well animated moe shows.
Great. Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's the video you should make, honestly. That's your comparison point. I'll compare this, Summit of the Gods, and Free Solo. How about that?
Sounds good. But I did have one question for you about the supporting cast.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Miyamoto?
I mean, he's the douchebag best friend character, right? Like, it's inevitable. Although I really like how they've fleshed out, because normally douchebag best friend character is just a douchebag, but is like very supportive of his like one buddy. And they're not at that point necessarily right now, though they're certainly getting there. But I really love that, like, he has his own goals, his own ambitions, his own relationships, his own crushes, his own feelings about every situation that they're put in. I really appreciate that. It makes him feel like a true deuteragonist and not just like, the guy off to the side who introduces him to the world and then kind of gets replaced.
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from with that. I will say it felt weird. His relationship with Yumi feels
so
odd.
Weird, right?
Okay, yeah, that's not just me, right?
No, like, dude, this is the one thing I hate about like this period is that like they just are willing to make rape jokes way too easily. It's so uncomfortable.
It just stuck in my head for so long. I was just like, he has a crush on the girl, and it's just like, why are you just saying that out of fucking nowhere? And then like,
I'm willing to accept that their relationship is just like that, like that, they're just family friends and that's just normal. I just think it's uncomfortable no matter how you spin it.
For sure. And then Yumi's just like, how you're going to France? Can I come with?
Yeah.
I thought they were also potentially trying to develop something between Mori and her a little bit.
Right,
at least early on.
Yes.
And so I'm just like,
it's fine if they want to change it out. I'm cool with that.
Yeah. I can't say I hate love triangles or else I'll be a massive hypocrite. But
Jesus Christ, Logan.
In a series like The Climber, I would not see it coming.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. I would be surprised if Mori gets into any significant romantic relationships. It just doesn't seem like that's his character at all, at least right now,
Yeah.
Like, this is a man who is genuinely thinking that he's fine with having it all end. It just seems insane that he would, then commit to a romantic relationship of any kind.
Married to the mountain.
Hell yeah, brother. You know it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens after. So Volume 3 ends on a huge cliffhanger. I'm looking forward to how that goes. I feel like we should make predictions. I wanna throw down. I think Miyamoto's gonna die.
I could see that.
I think he's gonna go to France. I think something's gonna go horribly wrong. I think he dies. I think that if there is a future for Mori and Yumi to get stuck together, I think that is the catalyst.
If we're going that direction, I could see that. I'm trying to think of like other because like that's the thing is too is like for one thing I'll say about The Climber is kind of like Medalist in a sense that it hasn't exactly followed your typical like sports story archetype, right? Like they've had to drag Mori kicking and screaming to try and get him to join a club for climbing when it's like, you like doing this, just do it with us here in safety in the gym. And it's just like, all right, what if I go free solo that snowy mountain without y'all's knowledge? Is that cool?
Right.
And so like, yeah, that's not where I expected like Volume 3 to go. And so it's like, I think it's really hard for me to project like what the future of the series is because it has 17 volumes.
Yeah.
And so like, there's so much room for it to, I guess expand. Like, is he going to enter? Like, do you think he's going to enter more competitions, or was that just kind of like we're just going to explain how it works and maybe Miyamoto can get a little bit of prestige sort of thing?
So I have no idea where. I don't know if competitions are going to happen. We do know that he eventually climbs K2 because that's the first page on the first volume. So eventually he's going to get into ice climbing, which is fucking awesome. I'm so looking forward to that.
Yeah, just hopefully he wears gloves.
Yeah. Yes.
His fingers, like that was honestly one of the weirder parts of the volume.
Oh, in Volume 3 when he's getting frostbite and his fingers are so fucked up.
Yeah.
God, it's so uncomfortable to look at. I will say, when painful shit happens in this, you really feel it.
It's one of the rare cases where like the artist chooses to like actually, simplify it. And like, it's just so unnerving to see like his normally very detailed hands just have these like swollen blisters on them. It's just like, no.
Yeah, it's really gross. I think Climber's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to continuing it. What do you think of the paneling in general?
I think it's pretty solid. Like, it definitely, I think it knows when it wants to use the page for like a reach or something like that. And like, obviously, like you said, there's sometimes it doesn't use spreads too often, but when it does, I think it uses them really well. Like, I think there was one towards the end of volume 3. I don't remember the exact context, which is dumb because I only read it like 3 hours ago, but it was just like looking at like the mountain or something, and it's just looked really pretty.
Yeah, I think the first chapter of volume 3 has the spread of the mountain range with him in the foreground, and the way that the light is hitting so that, you know, he's in shadow and the mountains are fully in the light. It's like, holy shit. I do think there's good use of shading, both in a literal, like, it's well shaded, and then also in a thematic sense, like the balance of lights and darks to show, you know, promise and death, I guess, is on the other end, is quite effective and affecting.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Oh, okay, I was going to bring up one other thing, because, again, weirdly enough, in the backstory, when they're talking about the, you know, with the teacher, sensei, like, Unishi sensei,
yeah.
and Mutsumi, I was, again, very confused about the romantic relationships, because if I'm remembering correctly, Sensei like says that he wants to, you know, go find was it Reiko?
Yes.
And like, as I'm going to tell you, I have something to tell you, and it cuts off, and so you don't know. But it's just like, but then she was going to get married to Mutsumi.
Yeah.
So it was like, I don't know. That's minor thing, but just had me again thinking about like the relationship lines were not really clearly drawn.
No, I think my read on that was Onoshi Sensei, you know, just had a huge crush on her and like just was too dense to realize that she was secretly dating someone else, because they were keeping their relationship secret, which is why, you know, the whole reveal happens.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
God,
and also is very in character for him to be like, he's a good guy. Like, he's probably the most lawful good, kind of like, if Hinata was a climbing enthusiast and then grew up to be like a teacher, I feel like he'd be a lot like him. Yeah, I agree. In terms of like kind of just like
probably maybe not punching people with the same vigor.
More intense for sure, but just kind of having that, like you said, like lawful good, like passion, and just like, I will protect you at all costs sort of thing.
Yeah.
Very, very shonen protagonist, even though I think this is a seinen.
Which is why Mori wants to climb until he dies. You're
not going to see a theme like that for...
No?
Well, I guess...
If March comes in like a lion, it is seinen. Never mind.
I was going to say, the only other thing about Mori specifically, and about like what his journey is going to entail, because I don't know what his the ultimate message that the series is going to use him to kind of push, but again, trying to be a little bit vague, but like basically the one kid says to his face like, everything's gotten worse since you got here,
right,
or something to that effect, and it's just like, okay,
yeah, that's a good way to handle it.
Right, and again, because that's literally exactly what Mori's internal monologue has been telling him, was just like, and I think obviously that's what a lot of, you know, people who are feeling down, or if not like outright depressed, often feel, is that idea that just like everyone around me does not like me, and everybody's lives would be so much better if I were not around. And like, to hear that vocalized is, I think, obviously like a very big inflection point for him. And so I guess that's why like I'm curious to see what he ultimately ends up doing, because I would think if this is a typical story that he needs to learn to fight against that. That
sure.
Even if, you know, somebody tells you that like you need to develop a strong enough sense of self-worth through whatever means to be like, that person's opinion does not define, like I cannot let that seep in and take over.
Yeah, I agree. You know, we are currently too early on to say for sure what the theme is. I do hope. Well, I'll be interested to see if it goes in the direction of actually being alone is totally fine as long as like you have something you care about. Because, you know, if he's going to be a solo climber forever, then it's not really conducive to like making meaningful relationships. I'm sure he will make those, because stories are hard without like, you know, having multiple characters is just kind of an easy way to write. Like it's genuinely hard to write a story only about one character,
especially when that character doesn't like do much talking themselves,
right, or emoting in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, it's rough. But no, I'll just be interested to see if it because I do think there is, a lot of depression stories, for lack of a better word, come down to make meaningful relationships in your life. Like your Sangatsu no Lions, your Tatami Galaxies, they basically come down to like, you have to have people you care about. And I'll be really interested to see if the Climber goes in that direction, or if it's just like, you know what, you need people, but they don't have to mean all that much as long as you have something that like really is driving you forward, and you just have to find what that thing is that makes you feel alive.
That was basically exactly what I was going to say. Is I could see it going like that direction of kind of like, what is the point of living if you don't have something to kind of like live for? And obviously the fact that Mori really enjoys climbing, albeit maybe for at the start unhealthy reasons, obviously it is something that he is really driven towards. And so like, yeah, kind of finding that motive to exist, and that like you need to have something that kind of like tethers you to reality, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. So would you recommend The Climber to people?
Yeah, I think overall, if you're okay with like a series that obviously has like a little bit of older of an art style and flip phones kind of show its age a little bit.
Bro, come on, the flip phones are the best fucking part. How can you say that?
It was fun. We're just like, it was fun because honestly it had a little bit of foreshadowing, because one of the first comments that I think Miyamoto says to him or something is like, how do you have friends in this day without a cell phone? And so it's like, that feels very salient.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think barring like literally just like one or two, maybe just like dialogue choices by the manga, if you are okay with like getting past that, because it definitely doesn't dwell on it, I think the overall quality of the series or more than it makes up for any of those potential little hiccups. How about you?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it, with similar caveats. If you don't mind stories that were coming out like in, I keep saying it, the late 2000s, early 2010s, in terms of like the art style, the paneling style, and including like the character style. This is kind of the oh boy, I'm trying to think of like a modern manga that has like similar characters. Ahiru no Sora. It feels similar to Ahiru no Sora in terms of like the visuals and the kinds of characters, but without a Sora character who's like the happy-go-lucky kid. Like if every character was like all of the the juvenile delinquents, I guess is the best way to describe it. That's every character in this manga.
It really does feel like that.
But I do think it's, through 3 volumes, it hooked me pretty hard. It helps that I'm definitely interested in climbing as a sport/activity. I wonder if I would care as much, because like I do not care about figure skating, but Medalist is able to grab me off of incredibly strong character writing and also just gorgeous art. Those are not really the draws for me with the Climber. It really is just, I really enjoy climbing as a sport, and I'm slowly growing to love the characters. But how many chapters have we gotten of the Climber? It's a bunch, and yeah, like 39 or something through 3 volumes. It's 31, and I'm like only just starting to like really start being interested in these characters. Whereas with Medalist, and Haikyuu, I was like from the jump absolutely down. So just a flag that, it might take a while to get interested in the characters, especially because these kinds of plots, in the modern era are more common. And I guess I just feel like they weren't as common at the time that this was coming out. And maybe this helped to popularize them, but who knows?
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for listening. But before we wrap up, Replay and I are going to give our really quick recommendations for each of these, as well as the overall ranking. So for me, all 3 of them, I would definitely give a recommendation that you should check them out, see if they're your speed. And in terms of ranking, just going off of what I'm feeling right now, I think I'm just going to go in the order we covered. 1 Medalist, 2 Haikyuu, 3 The Climber, with them all being relatively close. And I could see, depending on how each of them shakes out, that list varying to any degree. How about you?
I similarly would recommend all 3. For my ranking, I got Medalist 1, but I think this will be a surprise. I think I have The Climber as my number 2. This is purely based off of the first volume of Haikyuu versus the first 3 volumes of Climber, which is not a fair comparison. If I was to compare the first 3 volumes of Haikyuu versus the first 3 volumes of Climber, Haikyuu would murder. Haikyuu would be my number 1, actually. I know that for a fact. But, volume 1 is great, and I love it. But through 3 volumes of Climber, there's just so much more to bite into than just 1 volume of Haikyuu. So that's how I would rank.
I can see that.
And I think it's crazy that I have Medalist ranked above, given that it's just 1 volume of Medalist.
I was curious, considering you had said
Medalist
it was
is just so good. It's crazy how good Medalist is. I really am not. I'm not joking when I say Medalist. I think is the best manga I've read in 365 days. It's crazy.
Well, you take that to the bank, folks. God, that's lame. But we're gonna keep it.
You're gonna keep that in?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I cannot wait to listen to this later.
Oh God. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. I look forward to doing more of these in the future. And I think what could be fun potentially is, obviously I would love to have you on again at some point.
Never.
Got it. Well, then I was gonna say, in a hypothetical not gonna happen universe, we could potentially follow up with the 2nd and 3rd volumes of Medalist and Haikyuu, or however many, if not just tackle an entirely different theme.
Let's finish Climber, and then we'll have to get back in the podcasting.
That sounds fun.
We'll have to get back in the seats and see if our predictions turn out true or not.
That'll be fun. I look forward to revisiting that. But Replay, thank you again so much. Go ahead and tell everyone where they can find you. All your stuff will be in the description or wherever this is posted.
So you can catch me nowhere. I don't exist anymore, and I don't want to be found anymore. So that is where you can find me. But if you're desperate to find out where I am, youtube.com/replayvalue is where all my anime analysis is. And yeah, you can also just click, in the description, because Logan's going to make that happen. Logan, thank you so much for having me, my dude. It was a real pleasure. I'm almost glad I lost our fantasy football matchup so that you forced me to be here. This was a bet, by the way. I lost a bet, and that's why I'm here.